One of the things I really love about Legends of Tomorrow is its representation of punks. I don't really like the representation of punks in a lot of media because, well, it's boring. It's usually the same kind of bland stereotype of some either angry or unserious kid who doesn't like cops, and or is just kind of an ass and is this parody of question everything mentality. And those kinds of people exist for sure, but there are so many different types of punks and so many different types of people who are punk. I don't really care about punks being represented in negative ways. I just think it's weird how boring they are on screen. But that really isn't the case in Legends of Tomorrow. In the 4th season, the Legends are fighting magical creatures. One of these creatures is Charlie, who is a shapeshifter. They literally find her in the middle of Britain's punk scene in the 70s, where she is just being an absolute menace. She took on the form of the Queen and basically flashed an entire punk show, and I love her so much. So very, very much. But this essay isn't about the representation of punks in the show, because while I like it, it would basically just be me going, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like that too. And that's just kind of boring. So this essay will focus more on exploring Legends of Tomorrow as a show and its characters through the lens of what it means to be punk. If you try to define what it means to be punk by drawing lines in the sand and claiming that anything over that line is not punk, then you are kind of missing the point. You can say that punk is anti-capitalist and anti-establishment and anti-mainstream. It is simple and it's accurate, and because the definition of what it means to be punk is a rejection of established norms and social systems, it allows punks to mold and form it into whatever they feel fits them best, and that's why there's so many different types of punks. So yes, it is all of those things, but it's also a lot more than that. There's a reason punk music is so vital to punk culture, and it's because being punk is also about being yourself. As someone who is disabled and queer, I didn't like myself for a very, very long time. I've been told I am stupid, disgusting, useless, evil, that I'm going to burn in hell for all of eternity, and so on. And being punk didn't convince me that I wasn't any of those things, but it did help me understand that it doesn't fucking matter. So what if I'm disgusting? So what if I am this evil embodiment of Satan? I have been told that my existence is going to bring upon the downfall of civilization and society. But so what? If my very existence leads to the downfall of all of those things, then in my book, they can all go fuck themselves. And that's what it means to be punk. It's about expressing yourself. It's about being true to yourself. And it's about being angry that anyone would ever tell you that you are wrong simply for existing. The reason it is anti-establishment is because the establishment is anti-us. The reason it is anti-capitalist is because capitalism is against the free expression of self. The reason it is anti-mainstream is because the mainstream consistently rejects and belittles anyone who doesn't fit into their narrow view of what is and isn't acceptable. In my opinion, that's what it boils down to. I mean, there's a reason why we chose to call ourselves punks. It's because we don't fit in, and it's because we are deviants. But that doesn't need to be a point of shame. And as a matter of fact, it can be a point of pride. So, what is the essence of punk? What does it mean for something or someone to be punk? If making a definition of punk is missing the point of what it means to be punk, how can we properly explore the Legends of Tomorrow without being vague and confusing? Well, we can't. So, since we need a checklist for the legends, this is the one I propose. Number 1, Fistfight by Crisis of Conformity. Number 2, I Am a Poser by X-Ray Specs. Number 3, Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of Your Fist by Ramshackle Glory. Number 4, Burn Them Prisons by Leftover Crack. Number 5, Roll Me Through the Gates of Hell by Mischief Brew. Number 6, Woman Anarchist by Bad Cop, Bad Cop. And then number 7, just banger music. Since making a bunch of rules you have to follow to be punk is the least punk thing you could possibly do, I decided to base this quote-unquote checklist on a few punk songs that I feel captures certain elements of what it means to be punk. My thought process was essentially this. The first one is about the drive for punk action and praxis. The second one is about being yourself regardless of others' perception of you. The third one is about personal resistance and perseverance. The fourth one is about tearing down institutions and systems of oppression. The fifth one is about not following the rules and carving your own path. The sixth one is about politics or theory in a broader sense than just fuck the government. And the seventh one is about music. There simply is no punk without music. Getting right down to it, if you are a fascist, an asshole, or they just genuinely don't like you, then it is on sight. The legends will be thrown into random periods of time, either against their will or on purpose, and just start throwing hands. Their canon motto is, "We screw things up for the better," and on several occasions, using the legends to fix anything time-related has been described as the equivalent of bringing a chainsaw into surgery. They are not subtle and they are messy. In the first season, which sucks, they literally fight a fascist. That's the villain. It's the stereotypical tyrannical fascist who wants to rule the world. But the legends don't limit themselves to beating his ass. In every single time period they visit, someone either has sex with or beats someone they weren't supposed to. In damn near every episode. In the song Fistfight, there is a line that goes, "I guess my mind's all messed up, but isn't that a result of going to your schools, being a part of your system? I bet you'd like me to put on a tie and eat a Happy Meal. Maybe you want me to have 2.5 children and live behind a white picket fence. Well, I got a better idea. How about I put my fist through your window?" And this perfectly summarizes the entire first episode of season 3, where the legends are so bored of their lives that they break into the Time Bureau and steal the Wave Rider just so they can go around history and screwing things up for the better. And they do try to fit into this normal life. They put on a tie, they go to work, eat some Happy Meals, but they hate every single second of it. And the moment they get even a chance of escaping their normal lives, they take it. And they put their fist through the Time Bureau's window and they steal their car and damn near tears their entire building down to the ground with them. They run into problems headfirst and they don't stop until whatever fascist they're fighting drops. I mean, they have fought immortals, demons, literal gods and come out on top because they just don't stop. They take personal offense to anyone thinking that they have the right to be cruel to others. In the second season, the villains win. But through sheer fucking will and spite, they get back up and they try again. And they fail. So instead of being reasonable and taking a second to take a step back and collect themselves to figure out a plan to defeat the villains, they decide to break the first rule of time travel and interact with their past selves, and they quite literally break time. But just for the record, they do beat the villain. And season 4 just continues with this, where the legends take personal offense to magical creatures not being treated with dignity and respect and decide to do something about it. The way they go about it this time is not as violent as other times, but they still manage to tear down an entire branch of the US government. You can kind of say that this season was about fighting the rise of fascism and how politicians will manipulate our fears of the foreign in order to get their way. In the 5th season, they fight literal gods. It's the 3 fates that weave destiny. The 3 fates are basically just a bunch of history's fascists and fascist imagery lumped together. It is very obviously inspired by 1994 and very over the top. So if the fourth season was about fighting the rise of fascism, the fifth season is about fighting fascism. Which they obviously do. As soon as they realize what it is they're facing, they just start swinging, and they lose big again. Basically, the entire team dies, and they are only brought back in order to become propaganda machines to subdue the masses, which they obviously take personal offense to and break free from the grasps of destiny, kill a literal god, and then overthrow the government. Twice. Because the first time they did it, they only killed one of the three fates, so they decided to come back and finish the job. And I could continue and go more in depth about how ready and willing they are to fight and stand up for what they believe in, but I think I've made my point. Something very important to the plot of the first season is the fact that the legends aren't legends. The only reason they were recruited to join the Wave Rider to fight this future immortal fascist is because they are nobodies. They were the people who had the least amount of effect on the timeline, so if they were to disappear, it wouldn't really matter. And as I said before, their motto is "we screw things up for the better," and they are frequently referred to as the Chainsaw derogatorily. Their entire crew is a bunch of misfits, criminals, and losers, and no one ever lets them forget that. When the OGs find out that they are losers, it is obviously a blow to their ego. But after a while, they start embracing who they are. They start referring to themselves as legends, not ironically or even because they believe that they are legends. They do it because the meaning has completely changed. Being a legend isn't about being remembered through history as heroes, and they don't call themselves legends as a way of making fun of themselves for being losers. Being a legend means that you are a loser who is doing your best to do good. In Season 4, Episode 14, Nip/Stuck, when Gary had hypnotized the entire Time Bureau with his nipple and captured the legends with his fairy godmother, the legends are surprised that someone sees them as the cool kids, and they tell us directly that being a legend has nothing to do about being cool. The legends are losers. They're misfits who all happened upon each other and became a family. In Season 5, when the Time Bureau is no longer around, the legends are forced to participate in a documentary in order to get funding from the government. Wacky shenanigans ensue, and they realize that having someone constantly watch them and being seen as heroes or legends, it's not something they want. So they tell everyone that this documentary was fake, and they are booed off stage and makes everyone believe that they are frauds and liars. But not only that, the Legends as a show is very different from the rest of the Arrowverse. I mean, this is a show where they defeated a time demon by using magical stones to fuse, kind of like Voltron, into a Care Bear, and then beating the absolute shit out of that demon. This is a show where they defeated fascism through musical theater and brought someone back to life by singing James Taylor. It very obviously does not fit into the grittiness of Arrow, and while The Flash and Supergirl isn't as serious as Arrow, it is also not as ridiculous as Legends of Tomorrow. The very show itself doesn't fit into the universe it exists in, and the writers are very aware of this. Even the characters are aware of this, where they make constant jokes about not being invited to the crossover. And if you want to talk about embracing yourself, the show embraces itself to the fullest extent. That is the only reason it manages to be so ridiculous and so sincere and so fun while still being watchable. If you haven't already seen the show, you can probably figure out by now that the plot isn't what's most important. The show is very focused on the characters. Everything else can be as ridiculous as it needs to be. But the characters still feel very human, even if they're not. They all have their own lives and their own struggles that they constantly fight and battle. Take Sarah Lance, for example. She is a woman who have lost so much. Her humanity, her life, her sister, her father, her best friend. And yet, she continues on. She has an insatiable bloodthirst thanks to the Lazarus Pit, which the writers don't forget. In the first season, she struggles to control herself after her sister is murdered. She endangers the mission to get revenge, and this lasts for 1 or 2 seasons, where she struggles with whether or not she should use time travel to bring her sister back. But she learns to accept what she has lost. And even several seasons later, the wounds are still there. Her bloodthirst is the reason that she doesn't want to be in the same room as the Spear of Destiny, and it's the same reason that she is terrified of the Totem of Death. But with the help of her team and just her sheer amount of perseverance, she is able to slowly heal and build a life for herself, where she isn't always struggling. If you want to talk about perseverance and defiance against nihilism and negativity, we have to talk about Ray Palmer. This is a man who watched his wife die in front of him, and he is constantly being put down and beaten. He falls in love with the chicken person and almost gets married to her, and then she leaves him for another chicken person. He's one of the people I think that takes being losers the hardest. He believes in this idealistic hero, and that's what he so desperately wants to be. But he's also one of the first people to say that it doesn't matter, because the mission is still the same. Because people still need help. Even in the canon, he is often regarded as the most optimistic one, and rightfully so. He is constantly questioned about it by everyone because sometimes things suck ass. But it's made clear in Season 3, Episode 3, Phone Home, that he isn't optimistic because he doesn't believe things can ever be bad. He is intimately aware of just how bad things can be, but he also believes in himself and his team. In this episode, it is one of the few times we see him forget this. Refreshingly, it's the most pessimistic person who convinced him that pessimism is garbage. But this show makes it clear over and over again that he is right to believe in himself, and he is right to believe in his team. I am not going to go through every single character, but I do at least want to talk about Mick Rory. Mick Rory is a criminal. He is a supervillain, at least he started out as a supervillain in the Flash show. And he never stops being a criminal. He never stops being closed off. It's just who he is. But that doesn't mean he doesn't evolve as a character, and that he isn't one of the most caring people on the Wave Rider. Rory suffered a lot of abuse in his childhood, and he killed both of his parents. And that was kind of the state of his life until he met Leonard Snart. He found the first person he could trust, and eventually they joined the Legends. In the show, he is considered the muscle. He is big, he is willing to kill people, and yeah, if you don't look closely at him, that is kind of his character. He is also referred to as a dog or guard dog on multiple occasions, and he absolutely despises this. But I do think it's the best description I could possibly give him. At his core, Mick Rory is a guard dog. He is loyal, he is vicious, he cares about his family more than he will ever be able to express, and he trusts them enough to let them take the lead. In the 6th season, when Sarah gets abducted by an alien, and Ava is an emotional wreck, Rory takes the lead. Ava still considers herself the captain, but it's very obvious that Rory is fully capable of leading the team. He is fully capable of thinking strategically and tactically in order to achieve his goal. I mean, he was one of the most successful bank robbers of his time, even without Leonard. And I think that truly shows how much he trusts his team. And he knows what his role is, and he knows it's what he's the best at. And as long as his family is safe, he is completely okay to fill that role. In Season 3, we find out that he is a romance sci-fi novel writer. And this is not taken for a joke. He is shown to genuinely and deeply care about his books. He is sometimes made fun of it, but never by the show itself, only by other characters. And he forms this almost parental relationship with Mona because of these books. And when she leaves, he is taken very aback. But he understands and he is happy for her. When he finds out that he has an actual daughter, his first instinct is to protect her and decides to erase any memory she has of him. In his mind, he is exactly as cruel as his father, and he doesn't want that for his daughter. But after being convinced that maybe erasing your child's memory isn't the best idea, he puts in the work to be there for her, even if she hates him, even if she's ungrateful, and he is a good fucking parent. He manages to protect her through the destabilization of the Fate's government, while still fighting against the remaining Fates. This man is the epitome of your heart is a muscle the size of your fist, because his life has been filled with cruelty, and sometimes so is he, but he will never stop fighting for the people he cares about. I've mentioned the threat the legends pose to literally any government that they happen to be in the vicinity of, but let's really get down to how they tear down institutions and systems of oppression, because it's more than just causing chaos and mayhem. The very first season, they just straight up destroy a fascist regime. There's not much more to it. They literally killed that fascist in every single point in time and history. And they do it without the permission of the so-called Time Masters. The Time Masters are an organization hell-bent on protecting history. When the legends realize that the history they're trying to protect is a fascist one, they take that personally. And through a civil and calm debate, they inform the Time Masters that their insistence on upholding their perceived notion of the correct history is wrong. And, this goes about as well as you think it would. So they decide to blow them up. In Season 2, they are forced through the Spear of Destiny to be complacent in the three main villains' evil doing. They're forced to be complacent and do what they are told. But obviously, telling the legends what to do is never a good idea. So the villains tell them to leave history alone and accept this new world they're living in. Naturally, they decide to walk backwards and they break time out of spite, freeing the world from their fascist dictatorship. In Season 3, they are told to live a normal life and never touch time or history again. And they do what they do best, and they steal that fucking Wave Rider and become literal fugitives. And when they realize that the only way to protect time against this time demon is to fight one of their own and condemn her village to be burned down by British colonials, they tear down that entire prison dimension, releasing the time demon. And then they beat his ass. In Season 4, they literally tear down an entire branch of government because it was corrupt. And they also orchestrate an entire prison break for everyone that was captured by the Time Bureau. I mean, they are literally burning prisons down. They at first regret having broken the prison dimension and releasing all these magical creatures to begin with, but they eventually realized that putting them in there in the first place was wrong, and that it wasn't the solution. There isn't a single season where the legends are not fighting the government in some shape or form, and with only a single exception, there isn't a season where they don't beat the villain through very unorthodox means, like musicals or Care Bears, or killing a literal god, and so on. Something inherent to punk culture is leftism, and I do have to admit that this is where the show falls a little flat. Don't get me wrong, it's a very progressive and liberal show, but there's a difference between being liberal and a leftist. Liberalism still believes in the system. It believes that with the right people, the system is good. But that is not the case with leftism. Leftism is a very broad and vague term. That's why I chose the song womanarchist. Because being punk, you have to understand that the system itself is the problem. You are not anti-establishment if you just don't like who controls the establishment. That is not what that means. And when I say that it's progressive and liberal, that is not an insult. It is a CW show. I am surprised it is as queer and progressive as it is. And I am also so very thankful that the writers chose to just go all out. And yeah, it may sound dumb when I talked about how they literally destabilize a fascist state and fights the government any chance they get. But that's just Legends shenanigans. And look, I agree that it is punk, but the show very openly endorses the former president of the United States, Barack Obama. And it never really criticizes capitalism at all. Just because you criticize Trump, that doesn't mean you are a leftist. You also have to understand that the system that allowed Trump to become president also allowed Barack Obama to become president. They both carpet bombed children in the Middle East. The only difference is optics. Yes, I prefer Barack Obama over Donald Trump, but let's not forget that both of them have been responsible for untold amounts of pain and suffering as the president. And this is true for every president. In Season 3, Episode 7, Welcome to the Jungle, the President of the United States is represented in a positive or at least neutral light, even though this episode takes place during the Vietnam War, where the United States committed several war crimes against the Vietnamese. The US military should not be portrayed in a positive or neutral light when it comes to a war that they should be ashamed for having inserted themselves into. And there are more examples of this spread out throughout the show, but I think I've made my point. Lastly, before we get to the conclusion, let's talk about the music. What inspired me to write this script in the first place was the fact that one of my favorite songs of all time, punk or not, was made only because of this show. The song is, of course, Mr. Parker's Cul-de-sac. In a nutshell, Mr. Parker's Cul-de-sac is their universe version of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Mr. Parker is a vital part in the Legends being able to resist against the Fates in Season 5. And then when they finally won and Charlie went back to the 70s, they decided to go out rockin'. It's a song about friendship and family, and it's sung with such conviction and just raw punk instrumentals that you can't help but to love it. But it isn't the only punk song in the show. In 6th season, episode 3, The X Factor, Sorry and John sing a duet together. And of course, it's the Buzzcocks' Ever Fallen in Love. And it's another banger. The writers of the show have a way of understanding which songs are able to fit the emotional beat they're trying to hit the best. And this is about two people who are so very different from each other, with such complicated lives, who just can't help but to care for each other. They do end up being a thing until John is killed by a mushroom. But this song was perfect for the moment and perfectly expresses both how they're feeling and helps us as an audience understand and feel the same thing. The difference between the two performances is that one is in the very beginning of Season 6, while the other is at the very end of Season 5. Mr. Parker's Cul-de-sac is upbeat, fast, and it hits so hard because it's about family and moving on, which fits perfectly thematically and for us as viewers. Charlie is staying in the 70s and the Legends have to move on. And for us as an audience, it allows for this catharsis from a very emotionally heavy season. Ever Fallen in Love, on the other hand, helps us understand and connect with these two people and to understand how the relationship is going to continue further, but also understand why it took them so long to finally come to this point, but also understand why they care for each other. Or more accurately, understand that it doesn't matter why they care for each other. It just matters that they do. And there are a bunch of other amazing songs. James Taylor's Sweet Baby James, there is a cover of Space Girl, there is an original one called I Surrender that is sung by Sorry, which is just also so amazing. All these songs do a wonderful job to communicate how the characters are feeling, how we as an audience is supposed to feel, and just generally what is going on. The songs never feel out of place unless that is the point. And I just have nothing but praise for the cast and their performances. It's the conkclusion. So, are the Legends punk? Sure, I guess. The Legends of Tomorrow is a very punk show, but it's also a CW show. You cannot expect it to be this anarchist masterpiece. I certainly don't. It has a lot of very strong punk characteristics that makes the show so interesting and fun to watch. It is chaotic and ridiculous, but so very sincere. It refuses to apologize for what it is, and when told to tone it down, they turn it up to 11. The legends are the very definition of be gay, do crime. Most of the main characters are queer, and they are always screwing things up for the better. The writing makes it so clear how much the writers and the cast care about these characters, and the way we get to watch them evolve and persevere through the ridiculous and painful world that they live in is inspiring, and it definitely lives up to the song Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of Your Fist. And while we may know them for their hearts, their enemies definitely know them for their fists. And on top of that, the songs are fucking bangers. The only thing that makes them not punk is the liberalism. But for a CW show, it shows a surprising amount of punk energy. And I truly do love this show. It is messy and it is cute. And it's just so shamelessly sincere. And I'm so happy to finally be able to talk about it and have something to say. Thank you for listening.